All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Very excited to be with you on this Saturday afternoon or evening, that is for me. So it's morning time in Bali, Indonesia, and that's what I'm waiting for my guest, Carl Zha. He'll be here, so sometimes connections. I'm having some issues here with the weather, because that's why the image you might not be as clear. We have a major thunderstorm that is going through the region where I'm at. So anyway, very, very excited to be with you. Let me see, first of all, who is here. Say hi to everybody. Lester, Banana, good to see you. Willie Holman, as always. Nat Rando, Riza Fukuda from Japan. Good to have you here. Speaking of Japan, I'm going to have a guest next week from Japan. So I'll share this with you. Kevin James, good to see you as always. Phil from Ottawa, good to see you. Camp 35, good to see you. Who was up at 2 in the morning? 2 a.m. That's Taiwan still. 2 a.m. that is. So, John Smith and Omar Grant, good to see you. Damas, good to see you. And Tim Reynolds. So very, very excited to be with you guys. So I'm waiting for Carl to join in the studio here. He has the links and everything, but sometimes the connection. So I'm going to just share some announcements with you while waiting his arrival. As I mentioned, I'm going to be having some guests next week. So next week, I'm going to have Dr. Pascal Lotas. He's Swiss, but he lives in Tokyo, actually, or Kyoto. He teaches at the university there. He's a researcher in international relations. So I'm going to be, as a matter of fact, it was Ray who sent me an email, an avid supporter of the channel, and who's the one who, Okyoro, that is correct. He's the one who suggested, and I reached out to Pascal, and he was kind enough to respond right away. And we set the dates for the 26th of this month, so it will be next Friday. So the second person I sent an email to is Professor George Yao. You all know who George Yao is, right? He served on many positions in the Singaporean government. The last position he had was a Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I sent him an email, and I'm waiting to hear back from him, and hopefully he'll respond. So the other person is Professor John Mensheimer. I sent him an email, and I am waiting to hear back from him. So we'll give it a time, and we'll just because sometimes, you know, guys, it's the schedule, and everybody's busy, and this is why with Carl, I'll set it up ahead of time. He is also busy. That doesn't mean, you know, you gotta have to coordinate the but in any event, this is what I'm gonna be having next week, and I'll keep you updated and posted. So let me see. Well, Carl is here. Here is Carl. Hi, Carl.
Hi, David. How are you?
Good to see you as always. I know it's morning time for you. It's my evening here, so I wish I can chew on an apple as well. So
that was my breakfast.
Well, see, I eat dinner here at about 18:30. I eat very early because I go to bed early, but that's just been a habit for me. So anyway, very excited to see you, Carl, as always. And I've been now counting on this our bi-weekly or 3 weeks or once a month, whatever that is, our conversation to keep up on what's going on. And we have a lot to go through. You guys, I don't need to introduce Carl. He does not need an introduction. You guys know who Carl is. So let's just get on to the topics, and we just go from there. So, Carl, I want to get your feedback on the visit of Mr. Wang Yi to Indonesia. And as you know, who was in China about 3 or 4 weeks ago? It was Prabowo Subianto. So that's, to me, of course, the objective of the visits from each part was for some sort of not the same thing, for why Prabowo wants to Beijing versus why Mr. Wang Yi is in Indonesia. And to me, the importance of all this tied to what we're going to be also talking about the Philippines. In your opinion, do you think that Mr. Wang Yi trip to Indonesia is to resolve any miscommunication, misunderstanding, water dispute, territorial dispute, whatever term you want to use, and the Chinese looking at it in terms of you know what? It's a local issue. We can handle it. We don't need an outside party to get involved. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Indonesia is a very important country on its own right. It's the fourth largest. It's the fourth most populous country in the world, just after India, China, and U.S. And it's also the largest Muslim majority country in the world. And Indonesia has 275 million people. It's a growing market. Wow. Indonesia economy is growing very rapidly, and it's developing ties with China. So to keep people to give a historical context, Indonesia after the 1965 coup, it became, after the purge of the communists in Indonesia, Indonesia became a very anti-communist country under the dictator Suharto, and that's when the ties were cut off with China. And in fact, the China and Indonesia didn't restore their diplomatic tie until 1990, and then. But after that, the relationship very quickly built up. First of all, unlike many other countries in around surrounding South China Sea, Indonesia do not have a territorial dispute with China. Okay. There's no territorial dispute between Indonesia and China when it comes to South China Sea. But Indonesia is a very important member country of ASEAN, which is a country which includes all the countries of Southeast Asia. And ASEAN actually had a code of conduct regarding South China Sea that they work out with China at a multilateral level. So right now, the only one that's really having trouble, only ASEAN country that's really having trouble with China is the Philippines. And we know why that is, because of Bongbong Marcos, right? Because Bongbong Marcos want to get some of his dad's money that's been frozen in by the U.S. government, and so the ties is currently Indonesia and China maintain very friendly tie under the very popular Indonesian president Jokowi. Jokowi has been serving for 2 terms. And he is due to step down because the Constitution only allows 2-term president, because they don't want a repeat of Suharto, like a lifelong dictator. So because Suharto is stepping down, he, to ensure his own political legacy, he has his own son to run as a vice president in the same ticket as Prabowo, and they won. The Prabowo and the son of Jokowi, they won the election. So Prabowo went to China just to it's a gesture to reassure the Chinese leadership that the friendly ties between China and Indonesia will continue. He will carry on the legacy of Jokowi. All the relationship that was built up, including China building the high-speed rail in Indonesia. China is one of the largest. It's the largest foreign investor in Indonesia, and it's the largest trade partner of Indonesia. And China is very important for development of Indonesian economy, because in Indonesia, with a growing population, it needs a lot of investment in infrastructure. That's an area where China can help with. China already built the high-speed rail, and China is building power plants and building the telecom networks. Huawei built all the telecom networks on Bali here, and now in parts of Indonesia like Jakarta and the downtown Bali, they already have 5G thanks to Huawei. I'm in the boondocks. I live in the jungle, so I don't get 5G yet. So there's hope. There's still hope for me. So it's in my interest to see the Indonesian-Chinese cooperation continue. And so then Wang Yi came to Indonesia because Indonesia carry a very important voice in the ASEAN, being the largest country, the most populous country, and again they again reaffirmed the friendship between Indonesia and China, and they affirmed their desire for peace and stability in ASEAN. I mean, that's what most of the country, I mean, almost everybody in ASEAN want. They want stability. They want stability for economic development. And you know, Philippine is like the only ASEAN country where the mainland Chinese investment is you know, where the U.S. investment is slightly higher than the investment from mainland China. And this is because under Bongbong Marcos, he rolled back a lot of the Belt and Road project that was originally planned to go forward. And but when I look into that, that might not even be true, because the way they separate out investment, they separate out mainland China and Hong Kong. So if you combine the total investment between mainland China and Hong Kong, China is still the greatest investor, the biggest investor in the Philippines. It's like double the U.S. investment into the Philippines, and a lot of the money that's invested to Philippines through Hong Kong, a lot of it actually came from like mainland Chinese companies that was listed, you know, for example, on the Hong Kong stock market. And Hong Kong, a lot of ways, it's a back channel. It served the same purpose as it did during the Cold War. You know, it's like a window for China to trade with the outside world. So all of ASEAN depend on Chinese investment, and the Chinese investment completely dwarfs the U.S. investment. And so it's in the interest of a lot of ASEAN countries to continue to work with China. And there was a recent survey done by a think tank based in Singapore, and it showed that majority of the people in ASEAN that's been surveyed prefer China over US.
That is correct, Carl. I looked at that survey myself, and I do have the stats for it. As a matter of fact, I put the link for one of my videos because I addressed that. You're absolutely correct, Carl. And I confirmed the numbers.
And leading that favorability is Malaysia at 75%, followed by Indonesia at 73%. So and this is a very recent phenomenon too, because before, for previous decade, the same survey shows, you know, U.S. had a higher favorability among ASEAN countries.
That is correct.
Than China. But this is a year that flipped, and one of the major reasons is what's happening in Gaza right now. You know, Malaysia and Indonesia, they're majority Muslim countries. They don't like, you know, they really hate what U.S. is doing, supporting Israel committing genocide in Gaza, and this plays a big influence in the tilting of the favorability toward China. And so we're gonna
be talking about this one as we move forward. Before I forget, here there is one of my viewers here, Cam35, stated exactly what you said, Carl, about Indonesia continuing the last president's policies. This is to me why the Prabowo had to go to visit China first. But the visit personally, and again, this is my personal opinion, the visit that I see Mr. Wang Yi is to ensure that whatever issue can be resolved between the two countries in light of what the Philippines is going to be doing. And we're going to get into all this as we move forward. So go ahead.
And also another thing is, you know, China also want to ensure the relationship go forward. It doesn't want the relationship be derailed after the departure of Jokowi, the same way like it happened in the Philippines. Because during Duterte's time, Philippines and China had a very friendly relationship. But once Duterte is out of the office, you know, U.S. scooped in to make the offer that Bongbong Marcos couldn't refuse, and that relationship flipped. So China is also want to make sure that does not happen. You know, the stability get carried on forward in the bilateral relationship.
Sure. Well, there are a lot of people in Philippines now, and I was talking to some directly from here that they are missing the days of when Duterte was in power, especially in light of what Bongbong just did. Of course, the announcements, I didn't trust what he said when he was here in Washington. And I followed that trip closely, that visit, and I read the statements issued during the state dinner at that time. To me, when he said that, well, the Filipino government is going to limit US bases in the Philippines. I don't think so. He meant to say it. I think he was given the marching orders to state something like this publicly, but there was no intention of following through. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Carl.
Well, I mean, we can look at the facts. U.S. started with the basing agreement in the Philippines. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, U.S. used to have one of the largest U.S. overseas military base, the Clark Air Base, and also the
Mhm.
largest overseas naval base, the Subic Naval Base in the Philippines. And U.S. got kicked out after the end of Cold War. After Philippines, they had the People's Revolution that throw out Bongbong Marcos, the father, the Marcos the senior,
Marcos.
and and one of the reason is the one of the reason U.S. military base is not popular is because they bring crime, they bring prostitution, they harass locals, and they the local is bearing a burden. So the Philippine Parliament back then said, okay, if you want to stay, you have to pay more. We're gonna have to charge you more because this is a burden on us. And at that time, U.S. didn't want to pay more, so they're out of there.
Yeah.
So now U.S. is trying to come back in. And first of all, they did the basing agreement to have 4 Filipino military bases open to the U.S. military. And then
Mhm.
last year, they amended that to add 5 more bases. So there's now 9 bases
9.
in the
That's true.
Philippines open to the U.S. military. So what Bongbong Marcos said is obviously not correct. I mean, the trend is going up. They're opening up more and more military bases to
Yeah.
the U.S. And this is a quite departure from Duterte's policy. Duterte's policy
Yeah.
was specifically pivoting away from United States because Duterte realized the Philippines has been far too dependent on U.S. and he
US.
wanted to pursue an independent Philippine foreign policy, and that's why he reached out to Russia and he reached out to China. And as a matter of fact, we didn't have this blow up in the South China Sea dispute
See,
during Duterte's presidency because we now know that Duterte just gave an exclusive interview to Global Times, and
I saw it. Mhm.
he's pointed out that back in 2014, uh, Philippines and China had a gentleman's agreement when it comes to their dispute. So the history of the particular dispute around the second Thomas Shoal, which is it's
Yeah.
not an island, it's a reef. It's a reef which is submerged underwater in
Yeah.
high tide. So this dispute actually dates to 1990s. Like the claim of South China Sea that goes back a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
in the 19th and the 18th and 19th century, when the European colonial powers started to sail their ships through South China Sea, when they were passing through the 2 main island groups, the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
South China Sea, they only saw Chinese fishermen from the Highland Islands. And there's some explanation for why that is. It could be during that time in the 18th century. There's plenty of fish in the coastal
Mm.
waters, so people from the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, they didn't need to, sail very far to fishing. Whereas China experienced a population explosion in the 19th century, and because the population pressure probably drove these Chinese fishermen from Highland Islands to sail further, and also before the age of motorboats, the fishermen really don't go very far from their shore to fish, so the sailing is done by current and wind.
Uh-huh.
And in particular in South China Sea, it's done by monsoon wind. The Europeans, they have a little bit advantage in terms of sailing, because the European ships are designed to sail in the Atlantic, where it's much stormier. So the European ships are more sturdier, and they have the multi-rig sails that can manipulate. So the European ships back then could sail into the wind. But the Asian ships at that time, they're usually a single mast or triple mast, but they're all just like a big square sail, the traditional Chinese junks. So they use the weather pattern, the monsoon wind. So what the fishermen in the Highland Islands, they would do is, when the wind blows from north to south, they will sail to the islands in the South China Sea. They will fish for 6 months. And when the monsoon wind changes, they sail back home. So and on those islands, they build their shelters for their stay for that 6 months. Because most of the islands are uninhabited, because for other 6 months of time, because there's only 2 islands that have fresh water source, right? So the rest of the rocks, they're just rocks and reefs. And what happened is, the dispute came about in the 1930s, when Japan defeated China in 1894-95, and China have to give up Taiwan to Japan. Taiwan become a Japanese colony, and using Taiwan as a base, Japan start to infiltrate South China Sea, and the Japanese start to harvesting guano. Guano is a bird poop, which was used as fertilizer. And so Japanese started to harvest guano from South China Sea islands. And that's when the French colonial authority in Vietnam, and they're like, oh, whoa, we better grab, China is in no position to stop the Japanese. We better grab those islands before the Japanese come in. So in 1930s, while China was, in its still warlord period, different warlords fighting each other, KMT fighting the communists, they didn't have time to, enforce their claim on South China Sea. So French came in, occupied Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands to preempt the Japanese takeover. But even so, the French garrison in Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands, they had to be supplied by the Chinese fishermen coming regularly from Highland Islands, because those are the only fishermen that regularly travel through those waters. So even the French garrison that posted on those islands have to be supplied by Chinese fishermen. But Japan, after World War II, they took over all the islands in South China Sea. But as the defeat of when the defeat of Japan happened, Japan gave up all the claims of all the territory it occupies, including Taiwan, including the islands in South China Sea. But so in 1946, Chiang Kai-shek's government, a nationalist government, they sent warships to make claims on these South China Sea islands. That's when they draw the 11 dash line all around South China Sea, and they put boundary markers on these islands. And at that time, United States had no problem, because Chiang Kai-shek is a U.S. ally, and so they did not contest the Chinese claim. At that time, U.S. still controlled the Philippines as a colony, by the way. And so, but what happened is, when the Chinese Civil War comes around in 1950, the People's Liberation Army landed on the Highland Islands, the largest island in South China Sea. And the KMT forces withdrew from Highland Island to Taiwan. So suddenly all the KMT garrisons in the South China Sea islands in Spratlys and Paracel become isolated. And it was like, okay, we already lost Highland Islands. What's the point of having this isolated garrison out there? So the KMT pulled out in 1950 as a result of losing the Highland Islands to Communist China. Then in 1951, there was a Filipino businessman. He's claimed he suddenly discovered the Spratly Islands. so after that, mainland China and the KMT government on Taiwan's like, oh crap, we kind of we left a vacuum. So they went back to occupy the largest island.
The large island.
So from mainland China, they sail from Highland Island. They occupy the Woody Island in the Paracel Island chain. Woody Island is the largest island that has fresh water source in the Paracel Islands. And the KMT military, they sailed to Taiping Island, aka Itu Aba, which is also the largest island in the Spratly Island chain that also has fresh water source. So we asserted the claim, but the Filipino claim didn't. The Filipino businessmen's claim didn't go away. So in 1970s, the Filipino government officially they claimed they bought the claim from that Filipino businessman who originally claimed to discover the Spratly Islands. And so the official Philippine claim to that area dates from 1970. And this is important because Tony Blinken just went to the Philippines. He stressed the U.S. ironclad commitment to the U.S.-Filipino Mutual Defense Treaty. And he claimed that it extends to the South China Sea as well. But the fact is, the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty was signed at the time when Philippines just became independent. And the treaty was signed in 1951. And in 1951, the Filipino government did not make the claim. They haven't made the claim to the South China Sea yet. And the boundary of the Philippines was defined. So the history for people who don't know, Philippines was a Spanish colony, and the U.S. acquired it after the Spanish-American War. So the boundary of the Philippines, when U.S. occupied it from Spain, it was defined in the 1898 Treaty of Paris. There was a clearly delineated boundary that did not include the islands in the South China Sea. So that is a boundary that was defined by that the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty was bounded by. They were supposed to defend the sovereign Filipino territory that was defined by 1898 Paris Treaty. But what happened is in the 1970s, after the Filipino government made this new claim, and now Tony Blinken basically he expanded the scope of the original U.S.-Filipino treaty, mutual defense to cover. He claimed that U.S. treaty would cover the South China Sea as well. And now in the 20th century, UN. All the countries in the UN, they came up with UNCLOS, UN law of the sea.
Oh, you froze. Communication here, guys. So, he'll be back. Yeah, that's just part of it because, as Carl said, he lives in the jungle. All right, can you hear me, Carl? Okay, he'll come back. So, Alejandro, I do see your statements here. And yes, I did hear about demonstrations that's going on right now in Philippines. We don't hear much about them here. One of my contacts inside Philippines, that's how I knew about it. Nothing is reported here because the Filipino people are getting really anxious now about what Marco Bongbong is doing, dragging Philippines into some major issues there. So I lost Carl. He'll be back here, so he's gonna reconnect later on. I give him about a few minutes or so. Thank you for sharing this, Alejandro. And it's very problematic. And as you heard, Carl, the historical aspect does not get included in the conversation of the likes of Secretary of State when he goes, is the same arguments that's been made about Okinawa. This is why we never, for us here in the West, not all of us, of course, those who know the history of Okinawa, they understand the reality of it. Average Westerner, does not understand this kind of a reality that Okinawa was never part of Japan to begin with. It's the same arguments to some outside the United States might never understand that Hawaii is the same argument like Okinawa. Hawaii was never part of the U.S. So here is Carl just sent me a text. Let me check the. Let me check this Twitter. That's how I communicate with Carl, and he's probably texting me, letting me know he's gonna reconnect here. Okay, let me see the message. What it says: restarting my modem. Yeah, he'll be back. Okay, let me let him know. No worries, we'll be waiting for you. Okay, so just to go back to that one, the same arguments can be made about the Okinawa part, and this is why the historical aspect is very important. I'm glad Carl addressed this historical aspect for people to understand where things are, because you all know these guys by now. History can be manipulated. So if you don't know the facts or you do the research about it, a lot of people end up being misled. Oh, just because it was written by a government, or just because this university or that university wrote the book about historical. No. Even universities themselves, they can really manipulate based on what the government wants them. I mean, I look at like here in the US, and again, it's not about criticizing my country or the institutions here, but will I trust what Harvard puts out? Will I trust what Stanford, Yale, Vanderbilt, you name it? No, I won't, because I know what goes on behind closed doors between those institutions, academia, and the United States government in Washington. Same argument. So this is why it's important to understand the history of it. And here is Carl. Here is back here. So this is why I said, guys, I'm glad Carl addressed the historical aspects for you guys to have an understanding. Because without history, we will be left blind. And as I said, Western institutions, and again, I'm not about criticizing my country. My country does wrong. And if it does wrong, I got to call it out. Institutions, academia tends to manipulate history or historical facts. And like I mentioned to you earlier, Okinawa is an example. So Hawaii is an example. Even the state of Texas, it never belonged to the US, it belonged to the Mexico. So it's the same thing. I'm glad Carl mentioned this one about Philippines, especially the two islands, for you guys to understand. So now, yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so I got interrupted because my modem, I have to start it at least once a day for some reason. This is why I need continued
Why you live in a jungle? You live in jungle. You know what you need to do, Carl? I have a suggestion for you. You need to have a satellite connection through Beidou. And this way you don't have to run to an issue.
I tried satellite dish before, but it's slow. It's slow, and
really?
It's also affected by weather. If it rains, a storm, the signal is not very good. So this is why I need continued Chinese investment into Indonesian infrastructure. I need 5G over here. So back to the Philippines. Starting from 1970 onwards, there's a kind of rush. Gold rush to occupy different features, different reefs in the Philippines, and China in 1980s they finally made before they were concentrated on the Paracel Islands. So in 1980s, China occupied about nine reefs in the Spratly Islands. One of them is a Mischief Reef. So at that time, the Philippines felt okay. They're falling behind in enforcing their claim. So in 1999, they sent out a World War II era naval ship. It was originally a U.S. warship that was given to South Vietnam, and after South Vietnam fell, that it was transferred to the Philippines. So it was a really old rickety ship. So they ran that ship into the second Thomas Shoal just to stick their claim. And at that time, China was not very happy about this. It's like, why are you running the ship here? And the Filipino president in 1999, Estrada, he actually apologized. He said, "Oh, it's an accident. It's a mechanical failure. Don't worry about it. We will get the ship out there, which is completely bogus. But he said, but he did make a promise to China. He said it's a mechanical failure. We'll tow the ship away. Of course, now we're like 25 years later. That ship is still sitting over there. So this is the origin of that particular dispute around Second Thomas Shoal. So what happened is the Philippine government, they stick a dozen Marines on the ship, on this stranded ship. But those Marines need to be supplied, right? Because it's so what happened is China would send Coast Guard to surround the reef, and they will try to block the Filipino supply ship. But in 2014, when Duterte was in power, Duterte worked out a gentleman's agreement with China. China says, okay, we want to have friendly ties with the Philippines. We don't want this like cat and mouse chase between our Coast Guard and your supply ship to make have an impact on our bilateral ties. So let's do this. So China agreed to allow Philippines to send regular supplies to their Marines trapped on that stranded ship, Sierra Madre. In return, the Philippines promised they're not going to send any building materials. And so China's like, okay, humanitarian reasons, we know those people need to eat. You can go ahead and send them food, but we don't want you to send building materials. We don't want you to build up the island, because we still claim that island. And so that agreement held throughout Duterte's presidency. Now, under what happened? Why there's a flare up recently? Because after 25 years, that rusting World War II era ship is falling apart. It's falling apart. So now, in contravention of the gentleman's agreement they work out with China, now the Philippines are sending building supplies, trying to build up reinforce their position on the Second Thomas Shoal. This is why that led to the confrontation between the two sides, when the situation escalated. First, it's former aides to Duterte revealed this gentleman's agreement in the Filipino press. And then Bongbong Marcos have to come out and pretend he's surprised. He's like, I never heard about this agreement. I didn't know about it. I mean, this is bogus. He was, I mean, how could he not know about it? You are the freaking president. How can you not know the prior agreement your government made with another with your neighbor? So that was completely bogus. But the whole point was, it was to stir up water literally in the South China Sea. So to give an excuse for the US to pivot more military bases to the Philippines. I mean, the whole Second Thomas Shoal thing is just a trigger. It's just a trigger. The trigger is Philippines is being used as cat's paw to justify increased U.S. military presence in the Philippines and East Asia, and then they can use this opportunity to cast China as aggressor. So if you notice, now we have like the water cannon fights from all different angles. You go online, from CNN, Wall Street journals, you can see the Chinese Coast Guards almost from every angle, because they have journalists, American journalists, Filipino journalists, they've been flying in and they've been sending on those ships to take pictures, to film, and then to make more anti-China propaganda back home and say, look, China is aggressors. They're shooting water cannon at those helpless Filipino supply ships. But this is what U.S. What U.S. means when they say we stand by our ironclad commitment, because U.S. is actually not interested. They want to use Philippines as a proxy, the way they use Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. But U.S. is not interested to get directly involved. They just want to use this excuse to increase their military presence in the Philippines and to contain China. But Bongbong Marcos actually was interviewed by CNN by a Filipino reporter. He asked Bongbong Marcos, "Do you think United States will fight China on behalf of the Philippines. And then Bongbong Marcos was like,
I don't know.
yeah, he was like that on camera. But that's the truth. Duterte, in his exclusive interview to Global Times, he said, I know the U.S. will not die for us. This is why this is such a raw deal for us. U.S. is been pushing us in the front in the confrontation with China, but U.S. will never die for us. They want us to die for them. This is not a good deal for the Philippines. But this is how U.S. media in particular are manipulating this event to, again, just to portray more of China bad, China aggressive. But the people in other countries in the ASEAN, for example, Indonesia, they understand, they can see what's going on. That's why they're affirming their ties with China. And also, one of the vector of U.S. in containment of China is AUKUS, the alliance between U.S., Australia, and UK, with Australia acquiring nuclear submarines. Now, Australia actually do not directly border South China Sea or China. There's a big country between Australia and South China Sea, and that's Indonesia. And this is why Indonesia is not happy about AUKUS. It's like, what are you doing? You're going to make us, we don't want to be caught in the crossfire. And Indonesia certainly do not want to see a more militarized Australia. Australia already act as like a deputy of the U.S. empire in the South Pacific, in places like Papua New Guinea. Indonesia do not want, more military asset being deployed by Australia. And so from Indonesia's perspective, AUKUS is destabilizing in the region. In this regard, Indonesia and China has a common interest. And so this is another reason they're kind of publicly taking a stand, showing, hey, we are for stability and peace in Southeast Asia. Because most of the countries in Southeast, to be frank, they're happy to trade with U.S. They're happy to have a trading relationship with both U.S. and China. They want to trade with everybody. Their policy is, we don't want to pick side. We want to be friends of all and enemy of none. We don't want to be the grass when the two giant elephants fight. Grass will get trampled. We don't want to be that grass. This is why most of the countries in the ASEAN are aligned, more aligned with China in terms of talking about preserving stability in South China Sea. It's U.S. that's been the destabilizing factor by sending these so-called freedom of navigation patrols into South China Sea. First of all, China never said China never made a claim they're gonna block marine traffic in South China Sea, because that will be self-defeating, because 80% of the traffic through South China Sea is to and from China. Why would China block its own trade route? But U.S. is there. Oh, we're here to protect the trade route. And it's like that Australian parody show, basically saying, "Oh, what are we doing? We're protecting trade route. Who's our largest trading partner? China. So we're protecting our trade route with China from China." I mean, this is what U.S. is doing right now. This is completely ridiculous.
I have that one, Carl. I'm going to share it with our viewers. But before I forget, I had a conversation with someone inside Australia, someone I trust, someone who knows how the government operates. And you know what I was told? The concern that Australia now has towards both Indonesia and Malaysia, beside whatever they're doing, it has to do with the economy. They are concerned that both Indonesia and Malaysia is moving economically in the right direction. So let me share this quickly with you guys, with you all, because the one you mentioned, Carl, I do have it right here. It's hilarious. Let me put it up here for you all, and I'm gonna play it full screen, and let's play this one here.
China. Yeah. Okay. And what exactly are we protecting?
Strategic interests.
Specifically, Colonel?
Indo-Pacific strategic
Again,
interests.
Brigadier, really specifically.
Indo-Asia Pacific strategic
You know what?
interests.
I'll say it and then you nod. Our trade routes. Yeah. And who is our number one trading partner?
Shall we use the nod system?
Sure. China? Yeah. So under this scenario, we're spending close to $30 billion a year to protect our trade with China from China. And that doesn't strike anyone at this table as odd? I'll name one and you just...
This is a clip from an Australian comedy show like 5 or 6 years ago. And the sad thing is, it's still true today. It's even more true today.
Oh my gosh. That's too many highlights the stupidity of those in charge of foreign policy. They just don't get it.
Because I mean, like the real reason U.S. military asset in South China Sea is to show China like we can screw with your supply lines anytime. You know, we can go block the Strait of Malacca, block your major energy supply from Middle East. That's what the really purpose of this. But they can't say that. Of course, they have to say we're here for the open and free Indo-Pacific. We're here to keep the trade lines open to China. I mean, like,
doesn't make sense.
This is another but I think no matter what kind of shenanigans U.S. pull in Southeast Asia, the gravitational pull of the Chinese economy is just too great. I mean, now I came to Indonesia in 2019, and at that time, I saw like young girls listening to like Chinese rap, and they're watching like Chinese soap opera. There's already soft power, Chinese soft power already spreading in the region, along with kind of the economic power, and that will continue. That will continue to deepen with new generation. And this is nothing U.S. can do about it, because fundamentally, it's like Jerry Maguire movie. Show me the money.
The money.
Show me the money. China is actually bringing money to the table by making a lot of investment. United States is not. Economically, United States cannot compete with China for influence in Southeast Asia. Economically, U.S. can't even compete with China in a lot of other area in the world. So they have to. The only area they choose to pivot to Asia is military. Is military. Yeah. When they talk about pivot to Asia, they never talk about economic development. They talk about pivoting. And they promise. I know Joe Biden promised they're going to increase investment to the Philippines and to Malaysia, to Thailand. No. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Because Joe Biden made a lot of promises he didn't keep. He talked about this build the world back, build back better for domestic US. Build the world back build the world better for the world. That none of that came to fruition, and he's probably going to be out of the office in 8 months.
Most likely,
who's gonna take him up on that offer?
Yeah. What concerns me the most about now the Philippines after the visit of Marcos Bongbong to Washington, which, by the way, Carl, I think he was dispatched. He was ordered to come over. That's my hunch. That's my thinking. What concerns me the most is that where this upcoming naval drills between the U.S. and the Philippines. Because for those who might not know, please do not confuse this with the exercises that just took place between the 4 countries: Australia, Philippines, Japan, and the United States. The ones we're talking about are separate. It's going to be from April 21st all the way to May 10th. This is when it's going to be. What concerns me the most, Carl, is that this is the first time those drills will be outside the waters of the Philippines. We're talking about beyond the 12 nautical miles, all the way closer to Taiwan. That's what concerns me the most. Let alone the simulation of 2 main things. One of them is sinking a Chinese ship, and second one is the takeover of an island. Of course, the simulation, we all know how it goes. We ran 18 simulations at the Pentagon. We lost 17 out of the 18 against China. But that's what concerns me the most. And this coincides with what Japan is deploying in a unit all the way near to Taiwan. What for? If this is not a provocation, I don't know what we call it. That's the way I see it.
I think you are correct that the Marcos visit was probably coordinated because his visit coincided with the Japanese Prime Minister visit to Washington. And so they all can show up together for the photo op to show we're all together in containing China. And you know, that's when the Biden gave that ridiculous speach when he said, oh, the US and Japan has fought together for generations. I mean, like, what are you talking about? and you know, if anything, if you want, when it comes to Taiwan, if you want to mobilize 1 billion Chinese to be against you, the fastest way you can do it is to get Japan involved. You get to Japan involved, you know, because Japanese, you know, Japan and China has this history, you know, World War II and also before that, Sino-Japanese. It's because the first Sino-Japanese war that China lost Taiwan to Japan in the first place as a Japanese colony for 50 years. So you want to bring Japan back onto Taiwan issue? That's good. You're gonna get like young Chinese men to signing up for PLA in a heartbeat. I mean, like you will work better than any kind of the Chinese government recruitment drive. You know, just get Japan involved in Taiwan conflict. You know, all the young Chinese men will sign up.
It'll be over. Like, well, actually, I was laughing at this speech of Fumio Kishida in U.S. Congress, and you know what he said? Oh, he said we have to prevent Russia from using nukes. Well, didn't he remember that it was the U.S. that dropped the nukes on Japan twice?
So the Hiroshima Nagasaki anniversary coming up, and guess what? Japan didn't invite Russia. They did, but they invited U.S. You know? Of course, they invite the country that did it, and so you know, this is kind of the you know, Japan has a sadomasochistic relationship with U.S. You know, like they are because. But when it comes to the Philippines, this particular naval exercise you're talking about, so they use a made in China ship. So the ship was originally an oil tanker ship that was made in China. It was sold off to the Philippines, and then the Philippines Navy acquired it, converted it into a supply ship. So now they use that as a target ship in the exercise. I mean, this whole thing is designed to be provocative. I mean, like, and they even advertise it as we are targeting a Chinese ship. Well, I mean, it's a made in China ship that you guys bought. You know, you can do whatever you want, but they particularly chose that as target because they wanted to be provocative. That's why they make it targeting Chinese ship and practicing taking over island. This is just a long series of provocation that the United States is doing around South China Sea and in the Taiwan Strait. And they are just trying to provoke China into some sort of reaction. Same thing like when they fly Pelosi into Taiwan. But China have been so far Chinese response to U.S. provocation has been pretty measured and calculated. You know, just like the Iranian response to Israeli strike has been very calculated and measured. You know, in response to Pelosi visit, China didn't shoot her plane down. You know, China didn't send a fighter plane to threaten his planes, but instead they waited for Pelosi to leave, and then China started conducting exercise around Taiwan, and they start carrying out patrols all around the Taiwan island, and the Chinese Air Force start flying over Taiwan island. They start to circumnavigate Taiwan island, something they haven't done before. What this is what the U.S. calls the Chinese salami slicing or the gray zone aggression. They call it gray zone aggression because China is not attacking anyone. China is not China. And the same thing with the dispute in the Philippines. China didn't send its navy. China sent its Coast Guard ships. They're using water cannons. They're not using live ammunition. They're using water cannons. So U.S. find this very hard to accept because it doesn't give them an excuse for direct military intervention, right? How can you justify sending the U.S. Navy into a water cannon fight, in the South China Sea? I mean, like I said, they could send the U.S. Coast Guard. I mean, you have articles in the U.S. media talking about how U.S. Coast Guard can play a role to contain China. I mean, good luck, because the Chinese Coast Guard are built much bigger than the U.S. Coast Guard. So the U.S., if they're sending the U.S. Coast Guard, they're gonna get their ass kicked in the water cannon fight, because the Chinese have bigger ships and bigger water cannons. But are they going to send in the U.S. Navy to shoot missiles at the Chinese Coast Guard? I mean, that will be aggression coming from the U.S. side. So this is why U.S. find it very hard to deal with, and they call it gray zone aggression. They call it salami slicing. But in response, they just keep up escalating. They keep on escalating the provocation, hoping to provoke. They're like that little kid who like, put the finger right up your nose, like, I did not touch you. And this is why they send those out those Green Berets to Kinmen Islands, a couple miles offshore coast of China. This is again designed to provocate. It's designed to stir up some response from China. But so far, China has handled this much more rationally than United States. China is working through diplomatic channels. We showed the Wang Yi going to Indonesia. China is trying to get other work out deals with other ASEAN countries. And I'm sure China is also keeping communication channels even with the Philippines. I mean, I'm sure there's. Because we'll just have to see how long Bongbong Marcos' antics could last, because ultimately Philippines has a growing population of 100 million. People in the Philippines, they need jobs, they need employment. Right now, a large a part of the economy is supported by remittances from abroad, or by exporting like raw natural resources, or having like outsourced service sector. That's one part Filipino economy is developing there, because a lot of the Filipinos, they speak English very well, so there's a lot of call centers in the Philippines. But those could be under threat because AI revolution. AI could replace a lot of these service jobs in the future. So the Philippines, what they really need is investment in their infrastructure, investment in their education. Like they need a lot of investment. There's one country that could do it is China. The current Chinese investment from mainland China and Hong Kong combined already doubles the amount of U.S. investment into the Philippines. So that will only go up if Bongbong Marcos sign up with the Belt and Road initiatives again, if he changes his mind. So this in the long term, what this kind of cat and mouse game in the South China Sea does not help the average Filipinos. And if anything, they keep the Filipino fishermen away from the disputed area. Because in the 2014, as part of the gentleman's agreement, Duterte also worked out with China, is that Chinese Coast Guard will allow the Filipino fishermen to fish in the disputed waters. And so now with the tensions going up, those Filipino fishermen can't go there to fish anymore. I mean, this is a real problem. But that's not the concern for U.S. U.S. is never doing that for the good of the Philippines.
Of course, I don't see that happen. I don't see that Marcos will come to his senses, as far as he's too, he's under the thumb of the U.S., especially when it comes down to the assets here in the U.S., his family asset. I want to go back quickly to something you mentioned, just to let my viewers know. You mentioned about Iran, a response to Israel was measured and so forth. I just want to let you guys know, I just got a word that now the Russians is going to be sending the Su-34s. In other words, they're going to upgrade the Iranian Air Force. You all know what it means moving forward, and I'm following up on this because once you get the Su-34 and you get the deployments of the S-400 missile systems that have an advanced radars, that's a game changer. This is why Israel didn't retaliate against Iran. You know what's going to happen. I want to go back to one particular point, Carl, which I kind of drew a blank on it, but it'll come back to me. Is the idea of ASEAN. Now, I heard what you said about ASEAN, but I am still putting big question mark on ASEAN because, in my opinion, ASEAN didn't come forcefully, and publicly stated its case regarding how much neutrality they want to have, and even challenging Philippines for this. Maybe to the point of calling Philippines, hey, you don't get your act together, get out. I know Philippines is a founding member, but in my opinion, ASEAN didn't sort of press on hard enough to really put its credibility on the stage per se. Am I wrong in this assessment?
But ASEAN is a forum for all the Southeast Asian countries. I mean, like in all stages of development. I mean, Myanmar is in ASEAN, Cambodia is in ASEAN, Vietnam, Thailand,
Laos,
Malaysia, they're all in ASEAN. But ASEAN traditionally have been more like, we all let's get our wagons together, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya type of forum, right? It's not like it was never like a military alliance.
No,
or it's more like an economic
block
circle.
An
economic block. And so I don't expect ASEAN to really make like a use forceful language against one of its member nations. But the Asian way of doing diplomacy is never about like making a grandstand at the podium and say like we will not stand for this. Asian way of doing diplomacy is a lot of behind the closed door, the private conversations, that's away from the public eye. That's how a lot of the Asian countries prefer to work out their diplomacy, so they don't have to like what US is doing. When they send Janet Yellen to China to beg for money, she still have to say things like China is bad for overproducing. It's like that's counterproductive to your mission, man. But she has to say that to satisfy politicians in Washington.
Domestic consumption.
But that goes against her mission, which is really to get China to buy more treasuries. But that's not how Asian nations conducted their business. They for like hard discussions, they do it behind closed doors. That's and so I expect there's a lot of behind the scene closed door diplomacy among the Asian countries. They're not going to come out public as to say and Bamba Marcos is a fool, right? Like they're not going to do that.
Which is
they want to give him face. They want to give him public face. And so I think that's what's going on. But you are seeing, with Indonesia publicly, receiving Wang Yi, that itself is sending a message, right? I mean, when they made a joint statement, say they're for peace and stability of the region, that itself is sending a message.
Yeah. Speaking of Janet Yellen, that's one to China, and of course, who did we notice one after her? Olaf Scholz. And who is third in line coming? The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, is going to. What do you make out of Western leaders crawling to Beijing one after another, asking for help, economic help, given where Europe is?
So first of all, we have German politicians like Baerbock, and we have the EU president like von der Leyen that was publicly saying EU should distance themselves from China,
From China.
should decouple from China, should reduce their dependency on the Chinese market, which is completely insane because they're already cutting themselves from the cheap Russian gas, and now they're going to cut off their access to the Chinese market, one of the fastest growing consumer market, just for what? Because their master in Washington told them, we already know people like von der Leyen and Baerbock, they're Washington's creatures that have been groomed in the Atlantis institutions from their youth. So Scholz, he's doing damage control right now. He's going to China doing some of this damage control because in the end of the day, Chinese market remain very important to German automakers. China has the world's largest automobile market, and so they can't afford to lose that. So Scholz is there to smooth out the relations, but he still have to make some appropriate noise so Washington don't get upset with him. So that's why he put one of the things on the agenda. He talks with China is supposedly about the concerns Europe has with China's support of Russia economically, because that affects the Ukraine issue. It's from China's perspective, that's not our problem. We trade with everybody. We trade with Russia. We trade with you. Who are you to tell us we should not trade with our other trading partners? That's why is that our business? And so Scholz has been politely brushed aside on that issue when he brings it up to the Chinese leadership. And I have a feeling the reason Scholz brought it, but also to put up a public show for Washington. Like, okay, I tried to convince China to back off from Russia. I failed. I did my best. But his main mission is to smooth out the relationship between to do damage control, because what his foreign minister Baerbock has said about China, and then there and the Italian prime minister. Okay, so she publicly stated Italy is going to withdraw from Belt and Road Initiative.
The BRI,
Right? So first of all, Belt and Road Initiative is not a treaty. It's not a treaty. Like China did not come to ask country to sign on the dotted line. Okay, you are now part of member nation of Belt and Road. Belt and Road project is just it's a collection of investment project and the both sides can agree with. If you don't want to do those projects, fine. I mean, the whole reason he said, "Oh, we are withdrawing from Belt and Road project." Again, it's to show for Washington. It's to please the people. And she did 180 too. Before she was like saying, "We need an independent policy for Italy."
That's true.
And blah blah. After she got elected, what happened? She suddenly was like, "Rah rah Ukraine! We gotta support Ukraine." and the coverage of her just changed 180 in the U.S. mainstream media and her reception, because before the U.S. mainstream media was calling her a fascist, like the reincarnation of Mussolini, and then as soon as she shows supply, as soon as she lines behind NATO in support of Ukraine, and suddenly she's a welcome guest in Washington. All right, and then she also makes the appropriate noise about Italy withdrawing from BRI. It's like BRI is not a treaty. It's not alliance. If you don't want to do a project, you don't do a project. No big deal. and a lot of these projects are not even like government. It's like between private companies. The government, U.S. government, Chinese government may provide some support in terms of financing. Allows the Chinese banks to provide financing, but that's about it. So a lot of this is about rhetorics. This is kind of shows the difference between the Western politicians and the Asian politicians, because they in the West is all about talking a big game, right? U.S. culture definitely rewards extroverts, right? If you're a lawyer, you go far in the politics because you can talk. If you're a bullshitter, you make a good politician. But in Chinese culture, Confucius said, listen to one's words, but watch one's action. They place more emphasis in Chinese
Yeah.
culture, they place more emphasis on the result.
Yeah.
It's more result oriented. Whereas in the West, it's all process oriented. When they talk about process, it's just these politicians standing up in podium making a bunch of promises,
Yeah.
and then they never fulfill them.
Yeah. I would be curious to see when she goes who will be in her reception. Remember who received Olaf Scholz when he landed in Guangdong, I believe. It was the vice mayor, right?
Oh,
Which
my
says,
city. She landed in my city, Chongqing.
The-
He was met by the deputy. He was met by deputy mayor because I guess the mayor
Wow.
must have something more important to do.
Important
that day.
Yeah. So I wonder, Georgina, who's gonna be receiving her for that. So, all right, guys. Before I forget, just prepare a question or two for Carl later on. We still have gonna tackle one particular topic, one theme that is, and I'll turn the floor for Carl for the closing statement. So, one thing I want to talk to you about, Carl, it has to do with the recent statement by China regarding the recognition of Palestine. We all know that it was a veto at the UN Security Council. And I did a survey for my community here, asking them, in your opinion, should we get rid of the UN, get rid of the UN Security Council? And 81% said yes. So Mr. Wang Yi calls now that the US should honor something like this and call for the immediate. China calls now for the immediate recognition of Palestine as a full member of the UN. Is this an indication, in your opinion? Is this an indication of China might play a role into this Arab-Israeli conflict?
Well, if any big power that's well positioned to be the peacemaker, I think it will be China. Given China's track records brokering the peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the problem, and again, China offered to be the mediator in the Ukraine conflict. But in the Ukraine conflict, we know it's the West that rejected the peace deal. They did,
Sure.
they did that as far back as 2022. During the meeting in Istanbul, when Ukrainian side was already ready to sign an agreement with Russia, then Boris Johnson comes in like, no, don't do it. We got your back. We support you 100%. And even today, one of the biggest block to a peace settlement in Ukraine is still because the unwillingness of NATO alliance to let Ukraine go as a proxy, to hit Russia with. And same thing I think when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, the problem is Israel. Israel right now has shown no indication that it wants a peace settlement. Israel is trying to escalate the conflict. They're trying to escalate beyond Palestine. They're hitting. That's why they're trying to escalate with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Syria. They're hitting Syria, Iraq, and they're hitting Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu's goal is to get U.S. dragged
involved.
in deeper, more directly involved, and this is because Bibi is fighting for his political life. Netanyahu, before this conflict broke out, he was facing corruption charges. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's guilty. I mean, it's not just him, his family too, his wife, and I'm pretty sure he's guilty. But as long as he can keep the conflict going, he can play as a wartime president. Get people to rally behind the flag. And it's like, okay, we are facing the existential threat. We all have to unite together. And so they are. So if Israeli government is rational, is acting rationally, they would not have hit Iranian consulate in Damascus. And after the Iranian counterstrike, they would not have tried to launch another face-saving strike against Iran. They could have just, after the Iranian counterstrike, they could have just claimed a propaganda victory. They could just claim,
Yeah.
I don't believe they say they intercepted 99% of the incoming missiles, but
No,
they
no,
can
no.
claim
It's-
it. They can,
yeah.
they can claim it. They can claim, oh, we scored a great victory. We intercepted on 99%. It was a great victory for the Iron Dome and Israeli air defense.
Yeah.
And then call it a day. And then you can escalate from there. But they didn't do that. They're like, well, the fact that they didn't do that, they feel the need to hit Iran again. That means the Iranian counterstrike really hurt. You know, they had to. That's why they had to make another gesture. But this is very childish. This is very childish, and it's very dangerous because this just let the escalation out of control. I mean, it's a upward spiral, and right now, the only thing we can count on is maybe the unwillingness of the United States to get more deeply involved, because U.S. empire is already overstretched. They're still doing the proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, and they're trying to increase the tension in South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, and they just don't have the kind of lacks the capability to keep going in Middle East. I mean, they're already failing the so-called the largest battle the U.S. Navy had been involved in after World War II in the Red Sea. They're failing to break through the blockade, and so U.S. and also plus that Biden is facing re-election. He doesn't want this to blow up even more than then. And the thing is about the U.S. statement in UN, all they had to do. If they have decency, they can just have decency to abstain, like their puppet UK did. The fact that they chose to be the only one to veto it when
it's bad.
Overwhelming member have voted for admission of Palestine, and in response, the U.S. ambassador to UN, he said, our vote against the entry of Palestine into UN, it does not negate our support for Palestinian statehood. I mean, this is kind of very Orwellian doublespeak that everybody just sees through. If you want to pay lip service, don't do it so obvious. People are seeing you are talking with forked tongue, and the U.S. soft power, U.S. prestige all over the world is being dragged through the floor right now. I mean, this is one of the reasons that people in Malaysia and Indonesia now prefer China over U.S. because they really hate to see what U.S. is doing in supporting Israel, and I think UN is useless anyway. I mean, UN just
that's
come
true.
up with all
I believe that too.
Toothless resolutions. I mean, if UN's resolution has any teeth, we wouldn't be. There would have been two-state solution implemented back 50, 60 years ago, but UN resolution have no teeth. But that's why a lot of people are putting hopes into BRICS as potentially a new international framework, at least for the global South countries, that's counter the unipolar hegemony led by US.
Very interesting. Last thing we're going to cover briefly here, Carl, before I open the floor for questions, is earlier it was a vote. I didn't see the result yet. It was a vote in Congress, believe it or not, today, on Saturday. It's not a business day. It was a vote for $95 billion that's going to go to 3 locations. One is Ukraine, second is Israel, and third is Taiwan. I'd like to get your take, not about Ukraine, and we all know what that is, for Taiwan. What do you think this particular aid is aimed for specifically, in your opinion?
This aid is just to funnel more money into the military-industrial complex. I mean, because a lot of this money, when it comes to the U.S. Military aid, is to get Taiwan to buy more U.S. weapons. And even when you say aid, that means they use the U.S. taxpayers' money and give it to Lockheed Martin and Boeing, like what they always do. And then they send out some overpriced. Maybe that will allow Taiwan to get some discount. Because Taiwan is actually one of the biggest customers for U.S. weapons, and U.S. buy all these very expensive and outdated weapon platform. Taiwan was trying to buy tanks It's like, what the hell you need tanks for? You're an island. By the time you need tanks, it's too late. By the time the Chinese already landed on the island, it's too late. And U.S. also trying to sell Taiwan like anti-ship missiles. Like they sell Taiwan the stripped down version of F-16s. But this a lot of people in Taiwan even realize that the weapons they buy from U.S. will probably not going to work what it's supposed to do. But what they see it is paying the protection money. They're seeing this, okay, we have to pay this protection money to make United States happy, to get the U.S. on our side. So that's why we have to continually shove out money into the U.S. military to feed the U.S. military industrial complex, to make this U.S. congressman happy, to make them, to say pro-Taiwan things publicly. So that's how it's viewed in Taiwan. Even people in Taiwan don't believe these weapons will work.
Wow.
But yeah.
Very, very interesting. First, let me say thank you to Lester Banana. Appreciate your super sticker. You wrote, please invite Sas Regando Sasot to your show. I will reach out and extend an invitation for that. All right, let me see if there's any questions. Just please put Q so I know it's a question. There are over 100 people live here, so I can be able to, so this way I can go directly to a question from some of you here for Carl. Okay, I'm scrolling down here to see if I can come across something quickly here. It's hard when you have 800 live. How are you gonna get a question directly here? All right, let me pick on one here, and I'm scrolling. Osiris, great, good to see you. By the way, Osiris is an avid supporter of the channel. He's been buying me coffee, Carl. Osiris has been buying me coffee every day for the last 3 months.
Wow, you are getting
I'm caffeinated. I am caffeinated for life.
You're getting coffee from Cyrus the Great emperor of the Persian Empire, the founder of the Persian Empire. You're going places.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very grateful to Cyrus, literally. I also want to say thank you quickly to Seed99. Thank you very much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. All right, let me get to a question here quickly. If I can scroll. All right, here is a question from Timeline Dunkley, another avid supporter of the channel. Question: why China or people from Philippines don't spill the beans and let everybody know in the world that America government is holding hostage Philippines assets to control Philippines?
This is where I'm going to quote Putin during his Tucker Carlson interview. He said, it's pointless to compete with America on propaganda. We cannot win in that front, because if there's one thing that U.S. still do very well, that's propaganda, because U.S. invented marketing. Okay, marketing was invented in America, and U.S. till this day, they still control the airwaves. They're losing control a little bit because of the social media, because of YouTube and Twitter and so forth. But largely through mainstream media, they still control all the shaping of the narratives. And this is why Russia and China, they, gonna have a hard time to compete with. First of all, Russia, RT and Press TV, they're all banned from YouTube. Wow. They're banned from all the major platforms. And China, they again, when it comes to so again, I think there might be some cultural thing too, because the Chinese culture is more oriented to on doing things rather than talking it out. So they still have a lot to learn from the U.S. In U.S. they talk about Chinese propaganda, and I'm like, what are you talking about? China can't even compete, because they don't even come close when it comes to propaganda that was being produced by the West. They can't compete. How many people in the West watch CGTN? I think it's not like they didn't try. You have, for example, Duterte giving out interviews but which Western media mainstream channel is going to interview Duterte at this point? It's going to give him a platform.
Yeah.
And so if it wasn't for the social media, a lot of people wouldn't even know about it.
Interesting. I have another question from William N., another supporter of the channel. Question: if each new Philippine administration pivots from the U.S. to China, then China to U.S., how can the country have solid development and move forward?
So this is a problem with credibility, right? This is like when Obama administration signed the nuclear deal with Iran, and then Trump comes to the office and tore it up, and now Biden is floating the nuclear deal again, trying to get as an incentive for Iran not to escalate, not to retaliate against Israel. But the thing is, what incentive now do Iran have to trust the United States, knowing that U.S. can just tore up the agreement in the next administration? Especially Biden might not even be in office in a month, but Trump might be back, and then the deal will be out of the window again. What's the point? So that is a problem, and this is a problem especially around these so-called liberal democracies that revolve around election cycles. Every 4 or 5 years, policy might change. Might change. But I think China China would rather not have Philippines in the anti-China camp. If possible, China would very much have an incentive to work with any Filipino leaders who want to pivot away from U.S. and to working a cooperative relationship with China. So that's an incentive for China to work with the Philippines, because for China, this is China's neighborhood. China wants stability in its neighborhood to develop the economy. Unlike United States is intervening 1,000 kilometers away from its shore, right? So it doesn't care whether it screws up over there. It doesn't reflect back home. Whereas China, this is China's immediate neighborhood. So it wants peace and stability. China will work with anyone if they, want to pivot toward China. China will definitely take up on that offer. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, I'll do last one here, Carl. This is from Omar Grant. Thank you very much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. You wrote, the U.S. has no manufacturing base. The Ukraine conflict shows that. How will the U.S. confront China while it has no munition? Good point. Yeah.
I mean, right now they're having trouble to produce 155 millimeter artillery shells for Ukraine. And Israel is complaining about not getting enough 155 millimeter artillery shells from U.S. And this is Israel we're talking about, the golden boy, which always gets priority over Taiwan or Ukraine. And even they're not getting enough 155 millimeter shells to commit atrocity on Palestinians. Because the U.S. industrial base has been intentionally deindustrialized, because the military industrial complex realized, we don't make a lot of margins on producing artillery shells. We make more from kickbacks and grifts. There's a lot more opportunity for grift in stuff like F-35s. So more F-35. Let's not worry about artillery shells. They're trying to crank up production in U.S. There has already doubled the production of artillery shells in U.S. since the Ukraine war started. But that's it's been like 4 years. It's 4 years. It's only double the production, I think, because U.S. is already stretching to its limit. And so, any kind of conflict with China is it's ridiculous, man. A lot of the U.S., even Lockheed Martin and Boeing, all these companies, a lot of the U.S. Weapon systems, they're depending on like basic components that's sourced from China. China still produce like 80-90% of the rare earth elements in the world. This is why they're trying to sell the idea of decouple from China. It's like, we're gonna have problem to fight a war with China because our economy is so intertwined. So this is why we need to decouple. I mean, how do you decouple? Like especially when a lot of the production are not coming back to the U.S. You get some factories moving out of China to Southeast Asia, sure, but Southeast Asia economy is already integrated with the Chinese economy. And when you're talking about crazy stuff like blocking the Strait of Malacca, you're not just blocking the trade to China. You're blocking the trade of all the East Asian nations. If you want to turn all the East Asian countries against you, you block the Strait of Malacca, because all the people in the South China Sea depending on the access to the Strait of Malacca. So I mean, right now I don't think U.S. is serious about fighting a war with China. It's about increasing tensions so they can sell more weapons. So all these lobbyists and all these Pentagon top brass, they can retire comfortably to like Bahamas, and that's
or
the
go
real
to
game.
Or go to the jungle and live in the jungle. Well, Carl, I can't thank you enough, man, for your insight. Truly, truly appreciate you and appreciate the time. It's a treat for me just to have you here. You and I, we chat and we get along for whatever. So where can my viewers find you?
Okay, I have my own YouTube channel, just Carl Zha, and I have I am a prolific shit poster on Twitter or X.
Yes, and I follow you, by the way. Yeah.
And my handle is Carl Zha. And I also have a Patreon for my podcast, Silk and Steel Podcast, where I talk about Chinese history. I'm doing a chronological retelling of the Chinese history from the very beginning. Now I'm up to 533 BC. So tomorrow I'm going to start talking about 532 BC. I'm doing one episode per year. So I have a lot of years, a lot of episodes to go. And it's on patreon.com. People can go there and search for Silk. So the first result on the list should be the Silk and Steel Podcast by me, where I talk about everything about China, history, culture, and politics. And that helped to support my lifestyle in Bali, in the jungles of Bali.
In the jungle. Wow, that's great. And I look forward to our conversation next few weeks. So I'll always be preparing the good topics we can talk about. And there is plenty to talk about given the chaos that's going on the global stage. So once again, Carl, thank you so much. And truly, truly appreciate you. On behalf of the entire community, I say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Guys, I hope you enjoyed. Of course, this is something that I always want you to have, is to have a different perspective. And Carl does present that kind of insights. He's good in history and so forth. It's something for you to learn from. And I hope this is the whole objective for this channel, is to broaden your horizons, intellectually speaking, and we learn from each other. So I'm here to learn from you as well, guys. So I hope, wish you a good Sunday, whatever part of the world you're in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.